I'm officially a little more worried about the Boston College game now, but how much? That's the question. Let's talk about that and more right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. On today's program, I'm going to discuss if Missouri has already killed the new Joker position and the Tigers seemingly keeping a hot hand going in the dice game that is the transfer portal, especially on the defensive side of the ball so far. Before I start the show, I do want to say that Ultimate College Football HC is a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and 100% playable offline. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Begin your coaching legacy today. And speaking of coaching legacies, well, the Bill O'Brien era at Boston College began last night with an impressive victory in Tallahassee over Florida State. And of course, well, now with Florida State sitting at 0-2, definitely fair to wonder how good the Seminoles are. And yet, still an opening game victory on the road for BC. I mean, this is as big a victory as Boston College has had, really, certainly in the last 5-10 years or so. Heck, you know, Missouri losing to Boston College in 2021 was one of their biggest victories of that period, as evidenced by the Boston College students rushing the field that day. So it's been a tough go for the Eagles, a program that historically has had some moments, but in recent years, it's been tough. It really has. In the post, let's say, since Matt Ryan was around Boston in, say, circa 2008 or so. Ever since then, just not a lot of good things have been happening. But Bill O'Brien, the former Houston Texans coach, former offensive coordinator with the New England Patriots, well, they played an impressive game yesterday. They looked like a well-coached football team. I'll say that. I'll also say, though, that I think Missouri's talent just overall looks like it should be quite a bit better than Boston College's. Just based on that game I saw yesterday, I really believe that this is the deepest Missouri team that we've had in a long, long time. I'd say at least since 2013, 2014, that era. And to point out the obvious, well, frankly, it's unclear if Florida State is any good or not. In fact, I'd say it's pretty clear that they're not even remotely close to as good as they were last year, a team that obviously controversially missed out on the college football playoff. Jordan Travis got injured at the end of the season, the quarterback, and really that Florida State defense at the end of the season was absolutely dominant. But here's the thing, DJ Uiagalelei right now, the transfer, former Clemson Tiger, former Oregon State Beaver, now on the move once again to Florida State. And right now, that offense is clearly not clicking. How much you want to throw at Uiagalelei's feet is one thing. But here's all I know. The Eagles, who had one penalty in this ball game to Florida State's 7, looked pretty content to control the ball on both lines of scrimmage and kind of just let FSU mess up eventually implode on offense. They just weren't good enough. The early lead was, well, really just too much for DJU and the Seminoles. Quite frankly, I just don't think Boston College is going to have that type of luxury of playing sort of smash mouth Herman Edwards conservative football against the Tigers in week 3, but still an impressive start by Boston College nonetheless, and similar to Vanderbilt, I would say, after a week 1 victory against Virginia Tech, I think you got to take both Vanderbilt and Boston College a little bit more seriously. And as long as Missouri wins, maybe that's not the worst thing in the world, as there's been so much talk already in the offseason about Missouri's relatively weak schedule. So again, I don't want to overreact here because obviously, even though Florida State was a preseason top 10 team, Well, now they're 0-2 in the ACC, looking like they're going to need to fight for a bowl appearance at this point. So how good Florida State is a big part of this equation. But still, I think you have to consider that Boston College, coming off a really huge victory in week 1, is also in a good spot against Missouri in week 3. The Eagles have Duquesne at home this week. Obviously, what should be an easy victory for Boston College. They shouldn't have to worry about, the emotional come down off that victory in week 2. That's a good spot for Boston College, having what amounts to, a half of a bye week, let's say, coming into Missouri and traveling to the Midwest in week 3. So Boston College, I can't say I'm overly worried. I can't say that I'm picking Boston College to beat Missouri or anything like that, but you have to be impressed. You have to be duly impressed by Bill O'Brien and the Eagles in week 1, and you have to at least be more worried, I think. This is something you're telling your team. If you're Eli Drinkwitz, you're emphasizing this and saying, guys, this is a team that we can't sleepwalk through. Same thing with Vanderbilt. And, of course, they're saying same thing with Buffalo, too. I can hear some of you saying, hey, you can't look past Buffalo. I agree. The Tigers can't look past Buffalo, but I can because I'm not on the team. Now, really, I did notice a ton of obvious wrinkles from Corey Batoon's defense compared to the last couple seasons under Blake Baker and Missouri, but that's not a bad thing whatsoever, other than a couple times I saw a combination coverage that I didn't notice much, if at all, under Baker the previous couple seasons, where Missouri would put Drayden Norwood in man coverage on one side and have zone coverage on the other. Notably, that was the call, in my opinion, on Toriano Pride's interception, by the way. But in the offseason, the most notable change and wrinkle that Corey Batoon was going to put in the Missouri defense was the joker position. And based on what I could tell, well, a lot of the talk of here's what the joker is going to do, it didn't really happen. And here's I'll explain. First of all, what is the joker position? Well, it's one of the defensive end positions, quite simply, but it's always going to be, at least from what I could tell, from what's been explained to me, and also just observing the film from this Murray State game, that joker position is almost always going to be the field side defensive end I said that wrong. Let me say that again. He's almost always going to be the boundary side defensive end. In other words, the short side of the field. Of course, there are hash marks, pretty wide hash marks in college football compared to the NFL, for example. So when the ball is spotted on one extreme or the other, this becomes rather obvious. Obviously, there's more room to one side of the snapped ball or the other. Well, the near side, the close side, whatever you want to call it, it's often called the boundary side. Well, that's where the joker is going to line up. Usually it's going to be Johnny Walker. And what I noticed is, yes, this player was standing up. That's how it's easy to notice who the joker is, the field side, the boundary side defensive end, I should say. I'm sorry, I'm not great with that particular terminology. I should just say the short side of the field, honestly. I think that's a lot more easy for most people to wrap their heads around, including mine, obviously. So let's just say the short side defensive end is the one who's going to be standing up. And really, that's the only wrinkle that I noticed, because a lot of the talk this offseason was, this player is going to be dropping into coverage, in particular in the flats, I would say, to cover a linebacker going out in a dump-off type pass. I didn't see any of that on Saturday. I really didn't. So it'll be interesting to see, perhaps, as others have said and speculated, maybe Darius Smith's absence, the Georgia transfer who's out for the season, maybe he was going to be the guy who maybe was in that position and winning a coverage on occasion. I know a lot of Missouri fans, including myself, have noticed that whenever Johnny Walker was involved in pass coverage as part of a zone blitz, usually, it often didn't go well for Missouri. So perhaps that has been figured out by Corey Batoon. But so basically the joker isn't dead yet, but the joker has been hamstrung. Let's put it that way. I haven't seen a lot of weird wrinkles other than simply him just not being in a 2-point stance. Simply put, Johnny Walker is just standing up as the short side defensive end, And that's really about the only wrinkle that I've seen so far in terms of that position. So has Missouri killed the Joker? No, but it hasn't really made a huge impact, obviously, yet in terms of actual defensive structure. And in most card games, of course, when you get a Joker, that's a good thing. You get an ace, some face cards, that's a good thing. Well, Missouri has turned over a lot of face cards and a lot of jokers, especially in the transfer portal on defense the past few seasons. And the early returns for this portal class on defense are really encouraging so far as well. So let's talk about Chris McClellan, among others, coming up here in just a little bit. First, let's talk about Ultimate College Football HC, this new mobile game that I think you're going to love as much as I do. It's an amazing game and simulation that lets you step into the shoes of a head coach, lead your program to glory. Imagine actually being the head coach of the Missouri Tigers, getting to recruit your own high schoolers, hire your own staff, oversee training camps, scholarships. You decide every detail of your program. It's all in your hands. And here's what I really love. Not only all of that, you get to call offensive plays during your games as well. So your strategy is not only going to determine the success of your football season in each individual game, by the way, but it'll also shape the future and legacy of your program. And of course, I've got a special offer for all of my listeners. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk, as it will get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com, ultimatecfb.com, or look it up in the app stores. That's Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. Have to admit, I'm feeling a little bad for my friend and colleague Brandon Olson over at Locked On Gators. It's going to be a tough season for old Billy Napier, it sure seems like so far. I have to admit, not just a tough schedule, maybe not a very good team it's looking like either. So all that Brandon has to talk about is what's next. But also, speaking of what's in the past for the Florida Gators, Chris McClellan, transfer for Missouri, played obviously for the Gators last season in that famous 4th and 17 conversion ball game to Luther Burden last season. Well, McClellan now on the other side of that rivalry, and so far so good, to say the least. McClellan didn't play a ton of snaps, just like really everybody on the Missouri defense. Nobody played a ton of snaps, but boy, he definitely was very noticeable in his short amount of time on the field. Obviously, Toriano Pride had a huge game as well. The transfer from Clemson, huge interception, ran it in for a touchdown as well. Zion Young, of course, the Michigan State transfer on that very play, had the pressure that led to Pride's pick six. So really all systems go. I thought Corey Flagg had his moments too, especially as I pointed out on that opening kickoff, made an excellent play to blow up the kicker who was attempting to recover a said onside kick. I thought he stood out on defense as well at times. And on offense, well, Caden Green picked up a couple penalties, and some have said that Marcus Bryant, by the way, the Missouri new starting left tackle, got pushed backwards a little bit in the Murray State game. Quite frankly, I'm just going to have to take a closer look at the offensive line against Buffalo. I think that'll give me a clearer indication of what we're working with Marcus Bryant. That's just my opinion. I don't really want to go back and do the Murray State analysis of the offensive line specifically. Let's just move on, and I promise I'll take a closer look this week against Buffalo. And to make the obvious statement of the century of Missouri football, I'd love to see the defense look that dominant once again against Buffalo. If we're anything close to that, I'm going to start thinking, regardless of opponent, this Missouri defense is going to be quite a bit better than we expected. And specifically, I don't think Missouri's going to hold Buffalo to 1.6 yards per play or fewer than 100 total yards in this game. But what I really want to see is I just want to see the defense look as well prepared as it did in week 1, and I'd love to see that depth show up again, because I didn't even really notice, as I pointed out in my shows this week, I didn't even notice how many different players Missouri rotated in, even during the first half, until I looked at the snap counts. And this wasn't just at defensive tackle, defensive end, where Missouri often rotates. It was at linebacker and corner and safety as well. Not just, again, those big boys up front who you look to rotate quite a bit in college football. To me, that really speaks to the overall quality of the two deep. Again, at least in week 1 against Murray State, excuse me. We'll see what that looks like against Buffalo. Obviously, moving forward against BC, Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, those are going to be much bigger challenges and even give us a better indication. But I will say this. When you're that dominant, especially defensively, even against lower competition like that, it does actually usually portend good results against the upper echelon as well. And of course, Missouri is looking to keep its sellout streak alive this week against Buffalo, and on said sellout streak, which of course kept alive last week against Murray State. Well, Chad Moeller over at Rock M Nation, who writes there, he was the former sports information director during the Gary Pinkel era. Well, he said, quote, "There's no doubt that not all of the 62,621 tickets were purchased. I'm quite certain that there were a lot of giveaways and freebies and comps / add-ons, but to notch a full house for this level of game is a big deal." And I think that's really the takeaway there at the very end. And as to the idea that, hey, it was a sellout, but not all the tickets were literally sold to individuals, you know what I say to that? I say, good, fantastic. That is a tip of the cap from me to the Missouri ticketing department, the marketing department, whoever it is in the administration, in the Leach administration, that is in charge of this kind of stuff. Whoever deserves the credit, I'm going to fork it over to you, because like I've said recently, adding ticket revenue, getting every single dollar out of the live attendance gate revenue side of things is absolutely not the main goal anymore. At least not in the SEC, at least not at a program like Missouri. Now, at a program like Murray State, maybe the live gate is really important. I can't really speak to that. And certainly 50 years ago, 60 years ago, when television was not really a part of college football to any major extent, well, the live gate was basically everything in terms of revenue. Your season ticket holders, your parking passes, all that good stuff. Well, those days are long gone. TV money is now by far and away the biggest percentage of your revenue. That is now the cash cow. So to me, as I've said many times on this program now, live attendance should be about getting people in the building, which is about, frankly, making new fans and making the television product look good, by the way. Part of having a good television product is not just these event products, these event programming, which is college football. Hey, Saturday's an event, by golly. That's a huge part of what makes college football special on Saturdays. But if it's going to be an event, you want it to actually look like an event on television, and a full house, an excited crowd. That's good for not only your television partners, it's good for you, Missouri, obviously, in terms of recruiting and drawing new fans and everything else. So again, part of the live attendance thing, just as an example here, for the first time ever, I was able to attend the game with my entire immediate family in terms of my two parents, my wife, and notably my two young daughters who are 5 and 2 years old. Well, here's the thing. I was there to see Luther Burden. I was there to see Brady Cook and all those guys. My daughters were there to see Josie. Josie is the new twirler at Mizzou, who was also a member of our dance studio. So to them, Josie is the star. To me, Luther Burden is the star. So who's right? Well, both of us were right. The point is, you get people in the door, you make new fans. And I think it's quite possible that even though maybe my older daughter in particular was maybe more into the Dancy girls, as she likes to call them, than the football, she's going to get into the football eventually if she hangs around long enough. And coming up on the show, as South Park said back in the day, the corporations are being all corporation-y again as DirecTV and Disney are fighting it out. How does this affect Missouri fans? Well, it affects Missouri fans. I'm going to promise you that. That is, if you are a DirecTV satellite or DirecTV stream subscriber. Let's talk about that. And also, speaking of corporations, some corporate sponsors on Faurot Field. Let's talk about all of the ramifications there here in just a little bit. But first, get in the zone. 5-hour energy shots give you the feeling of alertness and energy you need to get in the zone. And sometimes, hey, you're on the back nine on the golf course. Maybe you've missed a couple putts in a row. Your concentration just starts to fade a little bit. Maybe you're getting hungry, that type of deal. You know what? Throw a 5-hour energy into your golf bag. Power through that back nine. Get your focus back into shape. I'm telling you, 5-hour energy is the brand that hardworking and hard golfing people like me have trusted for more than 20 years to give me the alert and energized feeling I need to get through a busy, hectic day or the back nine as well. And you know what? You'll always know where to find 5-hour energy shots right at the cash register at nearly every convenience, drug, and grocery store nationwide. So if you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5-hour energy product today. You can use my code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. By the way, it was cool to see Ennis Rakestraw, J.C. Carlisle, and of course Harrison Mevis back at the stadium this past Thursday. And one thing I noticed is that whoever set up this introduction to the players on the field was smart enough to realize that, you know what, we should give Harrison Mevis the main event slot here, as he's probably going to get the biggest applause from the fans. The thicker kicker, just a special place in a lot of fans' hearts, especially after some great game-winning field goals over the years, most notably against Kansas State from 61 yards last season. But the coolest thing about that to me is that the best part was that Rakestraw and JC, you know what? They gave Harrison Mevis the love too. They were like bowing down to him as the crowd gave him the huge ovation there. So I just thought that was a cool moment between those former teammates who obviously are going to be connected, I would say, for the rest of their lives. A big cool part of this whole Missouri football tradition and just sports in general. But you know what's not cool about sports these days? Squabbles, I should say, between big media corporations like DirecTV and Disney. So if you're an old school satellite DirecTV subscriber, or you're like me and you cut the cord, but you still want to watch baseball, so you have a DirecTV stream subscription, well, you're kind of SOL, as Nick Saban might have said, except he didn't say SOL on College Game Day. But you're out of luck, fellas and ladies, if you're a DirecTV subscriber, at least for now. We're going to have to see what happens. So if you're not going to be attending the Missouri-Buffalo game, that game's going to be on the SEC network. If you want to watch that and you need a subscription to ESPN of some sort, and just to be clear, ESPN Plus is not going to cut it. But if you are also like me, you may have some parents, some friends, somebody who has not cut the cord. For example, my folks, God bless them, they still have Dish Network. I'm not totally sure why. I'm not sure why they totally are still paying $200 a month for that subscription. But all I know is I'm the beneficiary now because I can log in and still watch Florida State and BC on my iPad, for example. So not exactly a perfect situation here for Missouri fans. The good news is usually these types of disputes tend to resolve themselves, but the fact that that basically it seems like Disney's playing some hardball here in terms of, hey, we're going to start negotiating right during the middle of week 1 of college football season here. So could be some hardball to come here. My point is, I don't know how all this is going to play out. It could be resolved by this week, the end of this week or something like that, or it could stretch out for months. You never know. YouTube TV, for example, still not agreeing with Bally Sports. You can't watch baseball on there. The Cardinals, the Royals, that's why I have DirecTV Stream. Well, now I have other problems. Again, not exactly loving the constant pull and tug of sort of these big media companies here, but it is what it is. Just wanted to remind all of you to, if you need to watch the Missouri game and you're a DirecTV subscriber, definitely figure out some backup plans for this weekend. And finally, speaking of corporations being all corporation-y, there was some talk of equipment share and shelter insurance, you may have noticed, have logos and advertisements printed on Faurot Field itself for week 1. And frankly, most people, I don't even think probably noticed that. I didn't hear my parents bring it up or anybody I went to the game with. In fact, I haven't heard anyone discuss it outside of the Mizzou beat, maybe a message board post online here or there. So to me, if nobody's really noticing or caring, and you got, I don't know, whatever millions of dollars from equipment share and shelter insurance, however much money that is, maybe it's just hundreds of thousands, whatever it is, that seems like a pretty good trade to me. You painted something on the field, your fans didn't seem to care, and you got a whole bunch of money. Smart move. You know, Missouri's one of the first programs and teams in the Power 5 to do this. You know, it seemed weird. I'm sure a weird sort of Rubicon to cross at the time. Well, back in the day, I mean a few years ago, as early as 1 year ago in Major League Baseball, it seemed weird to put corporate logo patches like Stiefel and QT on the side of the Royals and Cardinals uniforms, for example. But I don't know that most people really care. Maybe we'd prefer it the other way, but I don't think it stopped anybody from watching whatsoever. So while we don't always like the corporations being all corporation-y, this seems like a pretty obvious positive trade for the Missouri Athletic Department. But if you disagree, always hit me up in the comments on YouTube, on social media at Locked On Mizzou, or lockedonmizzou@gmail.com. So until next time, I am John Miller, and thanks for listening to Locked on Mizzou.